So, you're looking for guidance for your new character. You want to figure out what archetype do I put on this class to really make them pop? Well, here's my advice for every class in Pathfinder in 2nd edition. Buckle up, this is going to be a long video. Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka Thraben, you here for another Pathfinder 2nd edition video, and welcome to the best archetypes for every class in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Before we get going with the main video, let me say this is the last video that I am making to push for my analytics. I'm going to be evaluating at the end of the month here. Full disclosure, I am recording this on June 11th. And this will be releasing on June 27th. I'm going to be out of town in Vegas for a little while for a Magic the Gathering event. But when I get back from that, I'm going to be reevaluating the channel and see how much time I'm going to put into it. My goal is to hit 4,000 subscribers at the end of the month. We'll see how close I get to reaching that goal, and maybe we'll surpass it. If you are interested in funding a video idea because you like what I do with today's video or my other work, feel free to reach out via email, and I'm going to give a generic shout out to all my new YouTube members. I'm recording this one way in advance due to my travel, so whoever you are, thank you, and your names will be in the next video. And that will be happening on July 11th. I'm going to take a week off due to my travels here and some other plans that I have going on. All right, business minutia out of the way. So let's talk about our goals for today. I'm going to recommend you the best archetypes for each one of the fully released classes. I am going to ignore the ones that are coming up and are still in playtest versions. So even though I have thoughts on things like the Necromancer, some other time perhaps we'll update this video. And I'm going to try to be brief. I am going to cover 25 different classes, and if I take 2 minutes per class, which I don't know if that's realistic, it's going to be more on a lot of these, that is going to be a 50-minute video already. And this video took a long time to research and put together. So I am not going to screenshot everything like I normally do and just have everything on screen. This is going to be more of a starting point for you to go, oh, that does sound good. And then you can do a little research on your own. And I am going to timestamp every one of the classes for this video. Don't expect it for every single video, but this one felt like an important enough resource that I am doing it for it. So feel free to skip around if you are looking for specific classes here. Before I get going, let's talk about what the word best means. What does that superlative term really mean? In the context of this video, it is going to be the best generic recommendations that are going to fit most builds of a given class. And I give this warning here for 2 reasons. Number 1, for your specific build, with your specific weapon, with your specific stat spread, it is very, very easy for something to overperform in the context of your specific build. And there are a lot of weapon-oriented archetypes, for example, dual weapon warrior, that are only good if you are wielding a certain type or a certain number of weapons. I am largely going to ignore all of those sorts of archetypes for today. That doesn't mean they're bad, but they are not generic enough that I am just going to recommend them to every single person who sits down to build that character class. And number 2 here, it is very easy for a specific archetype to be way better in the context of your campaign than any given power gaming option. And a great example of this is the Dandy archetype. At, I believe, 7th level, it has an ability called Party Crasher, where with no check, no roll whatsoever, you just get into any party, any major event that has a list, you just get your way in. And if you are in some sort of regency, royalty, hoity-toity people doing social gathering campaigns, that is an absurdly busted power that will make your DM sweat bullets as you just say, no, we get in there. As your DM goes, what? And so context is key for determining what archetypes are actually good. And I'm trying to do my best to, with 0 context, say, this is what you should be taking. So just kind of keep those things in mind. I'm going to be recommending a mix of in-combat options as well as out-of-combat options today. This is not just a make the numbers go up video in any capacity. And I am going to say here that class archetypes are often stronger than other archetypes. So I will be recommending more class archetypes today, just on the basis of raw power level. Some GMs might say, hey, I don't want you to take a multi-class archetype, and you might need to explore other options if that is the case. And the last thing that I'm going to say here before I get into our first class, the alchemist, is that as my best piece of generic advice, it is generally better for you to increase your range as a character than to continue to specialize more. So, for example, if you are a melee martial character, you maybe don't always want to be taking another melee martial archetype. That's just you leaning into your strengths more, and it might be better for you to increase your range. And similarly, I often see people when talking about casters go, oh yeah, you should just clearly take another caster archetype for more spell slots. Well, having played casters for a long time, you don't actually need more spell slots than what your class gives you in most cases. And you might be better served by expanding your range rather than just trying to get better at the thing that your class is already better at. There's going to be exceptions to that, but overwhelmingly today, you're going to see me making recommendations that increase the range of characters, because that's one of the things that I think makes characters truly strong in this system. Without further ado, let's get into it. For the alchemist, I am going to be recommending the investigator dedication as my top choice. The devise a stratagem action is very strong. Long story short, you're going to get to see your possible attack roll before you roll it. Look into this ability, there's a lot going on there. And this is frequently done as a free action. As a ranged character, this is very strong. Imagine that there are two enemies on screen. At the beginning of turn, you devise a stratagem. You see, oh, if I attack creature number 1, I am not going to hit it. I am going to attack creature number 2 instead. And now you are not wasting one of your precious alchemical bombs or whatever attacking a creature that you would not have hit. I think this is a very good way to make your actions count as a ranged character. And the investigator and rogue archetypes offer something called skill mastery, where you get the chance to promote two skills above trained. One will go up to expert and the other will go up to master. And this is a very strong way to power up your character outside of combat. Investigator and rogue are going to be on this list many times for this reason. The alchemist is already a great utility character in terms of making consumable items for your party that get them through various spots. And if you supplement that with a bunch of extra skill trainings on top of that, you become very good at solving problems for the party, be that in recall knowledge situations, skill challenges, or just having the right mutagen to do the job. Beyond that, I like the exemplar dedication a lot for the Horn of Plenty icon, and this is something you can pick up at level 2. The Feed the Masses ability of this is a very easy way to send some sort of potion or consumable to someone at a 60-foot distance. So that's a really cool thing for an alchemist. Next up is the animist, one of my favorite classes in the game. And I recommend the druid dedication heavily. The animist as a divine caster with a little asterisk there because you are going to get some other spells and cantrips from other traditions, but as a primarily divine caster, your cantrips aren't great. And so by taking a druid dedication that uses the same key ability score, you get early access to good cantrips. An animist that has electric arc and frostbite, as well as the focus spell Earth's Bile, can be incredibly good at outputting damage without actually ever expending any spell slots. And that becomes very, very strong at low level play. And even if you don't get that high of level of spell slots from your druid dedication, the primal spells that you pick up there can all just be copies of something like Interposing Earth, a great reaction to give you some cover and block a little bit of damage. One of the things I often find on my animist was like, oh man, I wish I just could use Interposing Earth in more spell slots, and this is a way to do that. For certain levels of play, Beastmaster is incredible on an animist. An animist sometimes wants to sustain multiple focus spells at the same time, and that really eats up your action economy. The Beastmaster and any other archetype like it that gives you a mount, as of level 4, can give you a free move action. So if you get a free move action, you can still reposition yourself well, so you're in range to use your spells, while using one action to sustain a focus spell and 2 actions to cast a spell. Or you could do something like sustain, sustain, fire a bow. Like, you can be very, very good at using 3 actions. And so the 4th action that you get from a Beastmaster is incredible. Note here that as you go to higher level play beyond 9th level, a Beastmaster mount might not be good anymore, because liturgists can gain the ability to sustain when they do some things like step or leap. Next up is the barbarian, and I'm going to go 2 different directions with this one, because I know a lot of people that are playing barbarians want to bonk really, really hard, and I'll enable you. But first, I'm going to try to sell you on something else. I think the Barbarian covers combat stuff very, very well within their own class. And so I recommend a non-combat utility archetype that is fitting for your campaign. And the dandy that I used in the introduction is a great example of that. At level 2, the dandy can potentially provide 2 additional expert skills. And that is kind of a big deal. One problem that strength marshals sometimes have, especially at lower levels, is they do not contribute well outside of combat. They are not int-based in most cases, and so they don't have that many skill trainings. And Dandy bumping you up to expert in 2 things at the same time makes you way better at contributing outside of combat. And there's other things that can fill this same role. I like Dandy personally. If you want to boost yourself in combat instead, here's 3 directions that I recommend. The exemplar can offer you Victor's Wreath to give you 1 additional accuracy, kind of bringing you a step closer to a fighter. The fighter dedication can be very good. The reason why has to do with a very strange and unfortunate thing with how barbarian feats are spaced out. At level 6, barbarians are faced with a terrible choice. Let's say that you are a dragon barbarian. You either get your really cool breath weapon that you probably have been trying to build your character around, or you get reactive strike. And boy, that hurts. And if you take your really cool dragon breath, or maybe your elemental explosion if you are an elemental barbarian, you don't get your attack of opportunity until level 8. Well, a fighter dedication can give you reactive strike at level 4. Meaning that at level 6, you can do the really cool thing that you probably want to do with your barbarian. The other thing that a fighter dedication does is give you more strike plus or more 2-action activities. I would expect to have more of them as the barbarian, but it turns out a lot of the good ones are in fighter. So that multiclass is better than you might expect. If you are specifically an animal instinct barbarian and you are going to be doing unarmed attacks, consider looking into wrestler or improved athletics actions and more things that you can do with grabs. Next up is the bard, and both of my recommendations have something to do with movement here. I like the rogue archetype a lot on bards because of the mobility feat, which says something like, if you move half your speed or less, it doesn't trigger attack of opportunities. And I often find that positioning is really, really important with bards so that your allies or your enemies are exactly where you want them within your auras, or for you to line up spells. And I think mobility is really important. And with rogue, you also get skill mastery. Again, anytime you can cheat extra skill increases and skill trainings onto characters, that increases the range of your character or improves their abilities in social situations well. Beastmaster is also very, very good on Bard. The Bard is incredible at weaponizing all 3 of their actions, since they can so commonly use a 2-action spell and then a 1-action composition cantrip. Lingering composition makes it so that you don't necessarily have to composition cantrip every single turn. But Beastmaster does really free up your action economy. And Beastmaster was the choice that I made on my own personal bard that I was playing, and I was very, very happy with it. Next up is the champion, and I'm going to recommend the cavalier for this one. The cavalier is essentially a clone of the Beastmaster archetype, but there are some slightly different feats, including some ones that give your mount some perks when you raise your shield, which is something that champions will frequently find themselves doing. Beyond that, I think Blessed One is pretty cheeky on a champion. The champion normally has a choice between 3 different focus spells they can take at, I think it's first level. There is Shields of the Spirit, there is Lay on Hands, and then there's another one that's not as good, like Touch of the Void or something like that. Don't take that one. And Shields of the Spirit versus Lay on Hands is a very, very real choice. But you can just get Lay on Hands with Blessed One, meaning that you can have both of those abilities at the same time and kind of cover 2 different roles of 2 different champions at the same time. For champions, I often see people advocating for spellcasting archetypes, but in my experience playing champions, they have enough to do with their action economy already between the focus spells, raising shields, repositioning yourself. You have good action compression feats already, like Shielded Stride, that I don't really think you need a spellcasting dedication on a champion unless you want it for like out of combat roleplay reasons, and like you want a bunch of utility cantrips like message or whatever, in which case I think that's totally fine to do. Next up is the cleric, and since war priests and cloistered clerics are like 2 entirely different classes in terms of their mechanics and stat spreads and stuff, I am going to split this one in half. If you are a war priest cleric, depending on what you're doing with your hands, I'm going to recommend 2 different things. If you are willing to keep one hand free, I think the wrestler archetype can be very, very strong here. And Swing Ripper actually played and highly recommended a war priest cleric with the wrestler archetype as one of the best possible characters in the game. There is a standalone video on that on his channel if you are interested. If you are going to frequently be raising a shield as a cleric, which is something you might do because there are some feats that buff up your shields innately to the class and allow you to like gain bonuses to your saving throws or increase the hardness of your shield, then the Bastion archetype is worth looking into. And that is just going to improve your ability to use shields and eventually give you an extra reaction for shield blocking. For Cloistered Cleric, if you are going to be using Battle Medicine in or out of combat, or I guess treat wounds out of combat, the Medic archetype can be very good at improving the amount of hit points that you are restoring. Otherwise, you might want to look into a Druid dedication. Sort of like with the Animist, having access to some better cantrips can really improve your ability to cover more saves and do encounters without expending resources. The Druid also offers a pretty good offensive focus spell, Tempest Surge, that might be better than some of your domain spells that you are getting early on. For the Druid, I think there's a couple of directions that you could take this. If you are interested in going down the battle medicine and treat wounds route, Medic again here is going to be good, just like on the Cleric a second ago. The Druid has some features in its class that you may or may not be willing and able to invest into while still fulfilling your class fantasy. There are things there like familiars and animal companions that you might take with your feats, but especially if you are trying to do Order Explorer to get into a different order to poach that order's focus spell, you might find that you don't really have the room on your character to do all of that stuff and still support a familiar or animal companion. And that's where the Beastmaster archetypes or familiar masters can come in. Note here that while many characters probably would want to use their familiar as a mount for that extra action, I think in a lot of cases the Druid would probably use it as a standalone character that they are frequently going to command to get in the mix and attack. Another direction that I think you could take this is the Kineticist archetype, specifically going down the Woodgate route. Ember Sentinel is a very, very good primal spell, and having infinite castings of it at max level sounds pretty darn broken, and indeed, it is nuts. Speaking of nuts, fresh produce is another way that you could do out of combat healing. So if you want to largely ignore the medicine skill and you don't want to treat wounds, you can just feed people a bunch of nuts outside of combat, and that can be the way that you heal people up. It is technically in combat healing too, but it is a little awkward. It is good healing, but it does require the character that you cast it on to have a free hand and then eat that thing using one of their own interact actions. So it's not necessarily like fast and timely healing, but it is kind of reusable every combat and it doesn't cost any spell slots. For the exemplar, I recommend a utility archetype that is fitting to your campaign. The exemplar is going to be one of those strength marshals in many, many cases where you have a lot of strength, you have a lot of con, and so you're not the best at contributing to things like skill challenges and roleplay moments. And so having some utility archetype can really round out your character. If, for example, you are taking the Horn of Plenty icon, having an alchemist dedication so that you have more stuff that you can stuff into your Horn of Plenty, like that sounds really cool to me. That was a character idea that I was messing around with for a little while, but ultimately didn't play. If you want to go bonk, though, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. Like the barbarian, the exemplar runs into a really awkward choice at 6th level, where they can pick up their attack of opportunity, or they can pick up a hasted action thing called Flow of War, and that's a tough choice. And again, you might have to wait until level 8 to get your attack of opportunity, which is a really long time in a slower campaign. So you can pick up a fighter dedication to get reactive strike at level 4, and you can also get some 1 or 2 action activities that aren't transcendence things that are going to cause you to kind of move from icon to icon, and that can make it so you have more turns where you have high burst damage. Because a lot of times you will end up doing your kind of cool, big, flashy transcendence action with your weapon every other turn or so. And the fighter can make it so, like, oh, I can vicious swing and add an extra damage die in when it's not a good idea, or I am not able to use my transcendence action. And this is one of those times where your weapon choice might dictate what specific archetype you want. There are lots of archetypes flavored around specific types or categories of weapons, such as Mauler or Archer, that might become relevant here. Or even dual weapon warrior if you are making twin copies of one of your icons. The Magus archetype is kind of interesting here. The exemplar has some very good burst damage turns, but you can't necessarily have back-to-back burst damage turns in a lot of cases, and a Magus is a way to cheat that. So you might do a 2-action weapon transcendence action on one turn, and the next turn you fire off a spell strike, and that could be a very good way to open up a fight and potentially take out 2 low-level enemies in low-level play. Another way you could go about optimizing your exemplar is by picking up the champion archetype for some better armor and a very strong generic reaction, but this is only going to work if you want charisma on your character, which you may or may not actually want. Champion is a very strong generic archetype that if you qualify for, its reaction is just one of the best in the game, and it's something that a lot of classes might want to poach. Next up is the fighter. And like I do with so many strength marshals, I recommend improving yourself in out-of-combat situations. Again, if your fighter is going heavy on strength and con to make it so that they are a great frontliner, you might not be the best in skill-based scenarios. And so I really like rogue or investigator here for skill mastery to make it so that you have more higher proficiency skills. And archetypes that innately offer scaling skill proficiencies are really good. The acrobat for acrobatics, the inventor for crafting. Inventor offers some cool, blanked on the name for a minute, unstable actions that you could potentially use as well. And if you just want to go really hard in combat, take a Victor's Wreath. Your fighter is +2 accuracy over everybody else. Now you're +3 accuracy over everyone else. Enjoy your crits. or you can take a weapon icon to add more flat damage to your attacks. As a way to make your character more powerful. I don't particularly find that super satisfying personally, though. Next up is the gunslinger, who has some of my favorite archetypes. Sniping Duo is really cool. Essentially, you are going to select one of your fellow PCs and they are going to become your buddy. And you are going to be able to give each other bonuses as you work together to take down foes. This will be things like bonus damage. I hit the enemy, and so my friend gets a bonus. My friend hits the enemy, I get a bonus. It'll be stuff like that. It's really, really cool. If you want to design a pair of characters with someone else, this is literally what you are looking for. If you find that you enjoy fortune effects in this game, and by that I mean things like Sure Strike that let you roll twice and use the better result, you should look into Unexpected Sharpshooter. It gives you some very strong but limited use abilities that allow you to be lucky with fortune effects. Beyond that, I love Investigator on gunslingers. The Devise a Stratagem action is very potent on ranged characters because you don't need to move to target a different enemy. Again, if there's two enemies on screen and you know you're not hitting number one, you just turn and fire at number two. And this is particularly potent on gunslingers because they need to waste actions reloading. And even if their gunslinger's way gives them some ability to do something else while they are reloading, it is still an action tax. And everything you can do to make it so that your actions in combat count super, super matters. And I love Investigator here. Next up is the Inventor. And I like Alchemist here quite a bit. Conceptually, if you are playing an Inventor, you probably want to be tinkering and making stuff. And I think the flavor of someone who not only does like the robotic tinkering, but also can make alchemical stuff is really good. And again, having a range of utility is strong. So your inventor might innately be good at crafting, and so making it so that they can do crafting checks not only to do things like repair their shields or repair their construct ally, but also be able to make alchemical stuff sounds great to me. Especially if some of that is not actually going to use any resources or downtime, and it's just going to be done via versatile vials. The second thing I recommend here is an int-based caster, probably psychic. That tends to be the generic best one. Cantrips can give you some combat flexibility. And the thing that I am going to caution you on here is think about whether or not your specific inventor has the action economy to be using cantrips. Some of them will and some of them won't, in my experience. The more two action activities you take from your inventor feats, the less of a chance you are going to have to cast things like cantrips. I often find that for the first half of the fight, my inventors are contributing to combat very, very well. But then about the halfway point of the fight, when I have failed an unstable action check or some things have gone wrong or my positioning is bad, I often find that my character feels noticeably weaker. And this is where having an amped cantrip that you can send out or a focus spell that you can send out can really round out your turns and make it so that you have better longevity in fights. As a quick note here, some of those two action activities that have the unstable trait can be used in a way that does not use their unstable function. So keep in mind that some of those are still usable even if you have failed your, DC 15, I think it's DC 15 now, flat check for your unstable action. They're just less good if they aren't the unstable versions. While most of the time I don't believe that there is a correct way to build a character in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, as far as investigator archetypes go, there's a clear winner, and it is not close. It is the Psychic. We've talked about Devise a Stratagem a few times already in this video. It is a very, very powerful action. Now here's the thing. On an investigator, a lot of your damage output is linked to making a strike with Devise a Stratagem so that you get this big burst of precision damage. And the turns where you don't do that are noticeably worse. These are often going to involve you walking up to a different enemy and taking a strike on them without your nice precision damage bonus, or you do a couple skill actions that turn. And while those can often contribute to combat in a meaningful way, if you needed to burst damage an enemy down and then you failed your devise a stratagem roll and you rolled a 2 and you just know you're not going to hit, well, you can't do that burst damage thing very well this turn, can you? Until you go and you cast your amped daze on that enemy anyway, and you hit them like a truck. The psychic amped cantrips are very strong, but they are especially strong on this class, in my opinion. And the spell slots that you get from the archetype later on are really, really useful for filling out your reactions. The investigator has a good reaction. I believe it is called Clue Them All In, that can let everyone get a big bonus to a saving throw, but it's something like once a day or once every 10 minutes. I forget exactly what it is. I think it's once every 10 minutes. And once you've used that, your reaction options in combat are a lot lighter. So using your spell slots for things like Wooden Double can really, really help make it so that you are using all 4 of your actions, including your reaction, each turn in combat. Now for the Kineticist. And this is not hyperbole. Your class is bad at using free archetype. Because you are a con key score class, which nobody else is doing, the skill that you are pumping up the most is not just going to slide easily into some class DC or spell DC from another multi-class archetype or even other archetype. So this is a time where I really encourage you, pick something fun, pick something crazy. Kineticists don't need any other actions in combat. They are kind of action starved as is, so feel free to just kind of do something cool. There are some specific times that I think kineticists can benefit well from archetypes, but they're a little fringe. So, for example, single gate air kineticists can stride something like up to half of their speed when they use an air impulse. And so, if you are a rogue with mobility, so moving half your speed or less does not trigger reactions, then that means that you are not likely to eat attacks of opportunity, which can be a pretty darn good combo. If you are, say, a metal gate kineticist that is using impulses to make extra shields, then at higher levels, the destructive block feat from the Bastion archetype can be a very good way to use multiple shields within a single combat and prevent more damage to yourself. There's another kind of neat thing you can do with classes that have a class name resiliency feat, like champion resiliency, fighter resiliency, barbarian resiliency. The kineticists get a lot of HP from being a con-based class, but I believe they are an 8 HP per level class, not the 10 or 12 that you would get from something like a fighter or barbarian, which means that they can benefit from the resiliency feats, meaning that for each feat you get from that dedication, you get an extra 3 HP. And if you are trying to get in the mix and do melee impulse strikes, the game is very clear that your impulse attacks are not actually strikes, to the frustration of some players, because you want to potentially add your strength and con modifiers to them. Having that extra HP can be a big deal. And if you manage to go into something like a champion reaction, that can give you a decent reaction, which you may or may not have on a kineticist. Otherwise, the water kineticists have a pretty good generic reaction. A lot of the other gates don't necessarily have that. All right, I'm going to go really hard on Magus here. This is probably going to be one of my longer sections in this video, because most of the time when you see optimization online for Magus, the generic advice that is given is take the psychic archetype and get the imaginary weapon feat at 6th level, because it is the best generic resourceless thing to spell strike with, and if you amp it, oh buddy, it goes nuts. But in my estimation, the psychic archetype is probably like archetype number 4 in the rankings of what is actually good on a Magus. The Magus's action economy is so tight and so strained that Beastmaster is probably by far the best archetype on it. If you want to be spell striking and entering in Arcane Cascade and moving and potentially doing some other things like Sure Strike or other utility spells, such as, I don't know, Keen Axes or something like that, the free move action that you are getting from Beastmaster really frees you up to have better action economy. And I think having a mount is just the best by far on a Magus. After that, I think it is the investigator. Again, devise a stratagem is really strong, and knowing ahead of time whether or not it is a good turn to spell strike is a huge deal. If you are specifically a starlit span Magus, you can become exceptional at spell striking every turn. Again, 2 enemies on the map. You know you're not going to hit this one, so you spell strike this one. You then use a focus spell of some kind or use an action to recharge your spell strike, and you can repeat again next turn very easily. And even if you are not trying to spell strike every turn, which I don't think Magus necessarily should be in many cases, knowing whether or not it is a good turn to spell strike is super valuable information. After that, Victor's Wreath for a +1 accuracy forever, not only to you, but also to some of your friends. Pretty big deal. And then beyond that, I think Psychic for Imaginary Weapon starts to look good. I will say, to its credit, the Psychic archetype could arguably be better than Exemplar. The Exemplar dedication feat at level 2 is very, very strong, but the follow-up feats that you are going to get are not necessarily going to be good, whereas the follow-up feats that you might get from a Psychic might end up being better. So there's an argument there between number 3 and 4, but I think Beastmaster and Investigator clearly outpace Psychic, despite it being the thing that people recommend the most. People like to see the numbers go up, but again, the utility you get from that extra move action, the utility you get from this information, the utility that you get by giving yourself a persistent bonus that also can be applied to your allies that are close to you, I think that's better than just numbers go up. Magus is already insanely good at burst damage. You might not need to make the numbers go up. This isn't Final Fantasy X where you get a nice bonus for overkilling the enemy. The Monk is a really, really good class in free archetype games, in my opinion. And my primary reason for saying that is the Monk has exceptional action compression built into its own class. With Flurry of Blows being the obvious example, where for one action you get to take 2 strikes. That's great. And the Monk has a wide range of feats that they can take that leads their class in different directions. And one of the cool things you can do is take the Student of Perfection dedication, which gives you a lot of the key spells that you might already be desiring from the Monk with your with your free archetype feat slots. So you might be able to get a bunch of key spells with your free archetype stuff that you might have had to use your class feats for in the first place if you were just a monk in a non-free archetype game. And in addition to getting those key spells while still getting a bunch of your cool monk abilities, this also leads into the Jalmari Heavenseeker dedication, which can offer you some sonic and electric damage on your strikes. And if you are trying to strike multiple times with your Flurry of Blows, you might get multiple instances of both sonic and electric damage off. And if those happen to trigger some weaknesses, like oh buddy. I think wrestlers are really good on monks as well. The monks have a Flurry of Maneuvers feat that they can take, where you can replace one of your actions in Flurry of Blows with a maneuver, like a trip or grab, and that synergizes with wrestler really well. You have tons of other options for what you can do on a monk, and my question for you, if you're thinking about what archetype do I take on a monk, and neither one of these sound good, what I'm going to say to you is, how many actions do you have left on a given turn? Because the first time I saw a player play a monk, as they got to higher levels and their action compression got better and better, they were sitting there just not knowing what to do with the extra actions they had left over. And so if you find you have one action left over regularly, well, maybe you're going to raise shield frequently, and so Bastion becomes good. If instead you find that you have two actions left over, well, now maybe you can start thinking about Kineticist impulses or casting a spell of some kind. All right. The Oracle is a really strong class. You are a 4-slot per spell level caster with 2 additional resource pools. You get focus points and you get your curse-bound actions. So you have more resources than most other classes. This means, for the most part, you should not be looking at archetypes that are giving you in-combat stuff. You should be looking for out-of-combat actions. So I like Acrobat quite a bit here for scaling acrobatics. Again, you could look for anything else that gives you additional skill trainings. This is where like your rogue and such comes in for skill mastery. Maybe your dandy is something you could be considering here as well. And if specifically you find for some reason you just absolutely do not like the focus spells that you have access to as an oracle, you can consider Psychic to use amped cantrips. This is something that I don't really recommend. I tend to find that I really like the focus spells that oracles have available to them. But if you are playing in a very specific level range, you might go, I just don't like the thing that my mystery has to offer here. But like later on, I really like what this mystery does offer. And a different focus spell from something like a psychic might be good for you. Or you could go into druid to get tempest surge or something like that. But again, with oracles, I would focus on out of combat stuff. Your class is stacked. Does your class have some downsides? Sure, but there's a lot going for oracles. Next up is the Psychic. Now, this is a focus point based class. So if you can do something to get an extra focus point, that's going to be really good. And I think this is where something like Familiar Master can shine. The Familiar Focus ability can once a day restore a focus point. And if you just need one more set of amped cantrips to try to burst down an enemy or stack up damage on an enemy or whatever, this can be very strong. This is admittedly a once a day thing, but familiars have more benefits than just giving you focus points. They can effectively give you more trainings, more skill trainings, more cantrips. And if you want to put the familiar on the battle map, you can take abilities that allow your familiar to be hardier and have better chances at succeeding and not taking damage from saving throws. If the familiar master archetype doesn't sound great to you, if you are an int-based psychic, the witch archetype can accomplish very similar things, while potentially offering you some other focus spell options, or cool feats like Cauldron. And Cackle. Cackle's cracked. As a side note here, taking a witch archetype, or specifically Cackle, can be the thing that makes many specific character builds absolutely go nuts. If you are wanting to sustain multiple spells for some reason, you cannot do better than taking a witch archetype. Now, for a rules interaction here, when you unleash your psyche, you get 2 turns of being a, pseudo-godlike character that gets to add massive damage onto their spells, and then you get stupefied for a little while. And when you go to cast a spell, you have a chance at just failing at that. But, as the game makes clear, impulses are not spells. And so on your turns where you are stupefied, you can just use an impulse. And that is a fantastic way to make sure that if you have kind of gone all in too early in the combat and you unleashed your psyche too early, that you can still have some good turns afterwards. Of note here, you probably have not maxed out your con score as a psychic, so you probably want utility impulses that aren't going to rely on your DC. This is where the protector's trees, ocean balms, fresh produce, stuff of that nature will shine. And as you get higher and higher level, you can potentially do things like just make a wall on the turns where you can't cast spells due to Stupefy. Okay, maybe not can't, maybe shouldn't cast spells due to Stupefied. This Kineticist stuff was something that I came up while I was theory crafting all the builds for this video, and this is something that I am excited to try out later. Okay. The Ranger is really tough for me to make recommendations on because the builds can vary so wildly. You might be strength based, you might be dex based, you might be melee, you might be ranged, you might be thrown. And so making a generic recommendation is quite tough here. So I'm going to talk about some generic options and allude to some stuff. The Beastmaster archetype can be really strong here. The Ranger has ways to get an animal companion within their class features, but the Ranger has a lot of build defining feats at, let's just generically say, lower levels that might be competing with this and might be competing with progressing your animal companion. And so the Beastmaster archetype is very, very good here to make it so that you can have an animal companion and do all the cool things that you want to be doing from Ranger, because there's some neat stuff there like Gravity Weapon that you might want to pick up. Now, if we are being hyper specific rules as written, the first level Ranger feat Animal Companion from Ranger specifically says that your animal companion can benefit from your hunt prey stuff. And your GM might give you a little bit of flexibility there and says, yeah, you're a ranger, you took the Beastmaster dedication at level 2, you can just apply your hunt prey stuff to your animal companion. Or they might say, hey, you need to take the first level animal companion feat, then you can take the Beastmaster dedication and scale it from there. That's one of those ask your GM, see what they think on that one situations. I think the exemplar archetype is super cool on Rangers because I think it can enable some really cool builds by combining the exemplar icons with the Ranger class features. Shadow Sheath comes to mind for making really cool throwing builds. Starshot can be used to make some interesting ranged builds that have kind of a cool transcendence action for when you want a big burst damage turn. I think it's a reflex saving throw for the giant felling shot. And for flurry rangers specifically that are very good at having a low multiple attack penalty, the wrestler archetype can be particularly strong because you can take your action when you don't have a multiple attack penalty, and then with your decreased multiple attack penalty, you can then do an athletics maneuver. And that can make you one of the better wrestlers in the game because you can have that damage output while still wasting enemy actions as they are trying to escape your grab or get up from being prone. The rogue is going to be opposite of most other classes that I have talked about today. So many of the classes today, I have said, okay, your in combat is covered by your class. Let's try to cover out of combat stuff with your archetype. But the rogue has so many skill trainings and skill increases that all of their out of combat stuff is very naturally covered. And so I think the rogue is a time where you should be thinking about something that increases your power in combat. And I really like the Spirit Warrior here, which has a pair of feats, overwhelming combination, and then later cutting heaven, crushing earth that are really cool. Uh, Essentially, the gist of it is that you get to make an attack and then pair it with a fist attack as well. And so it is going to be very good action compression. And when you get cutting heaven, crushing earth, your target is automatically off guard, I think, against the second strike. So not only do you get action compression of one action taking two attacks, but it also naturally sets up sneak attack, which is something that you want to do. Sometimes you get things that say something like the target is off guard to your next attack. Well, if you are doing this and the target was off guard to your first attack, and then they're automatically off guard to your second attack, that is, for one action, 2 attempts at getting to apply sneak attack to one enemy. And this is really, really cool. As a note here, I think overwhelming combination as the flourish trait. And you can only do one flourish action per turn. As rogues start to reach higher level, they get an action called preparation at 12th level, which gives you an extra reaction. And you are going to have to decide which one of these do I want to do on any given turn. Because the rogues have some disgusting, absolutely disgusting, feels like cheating level reactions. Opportune backstab in particular is nuts. And if you get multiple opportune backstabs off in a cycle, like, ooh, it just sounds disgusting. Like, I want to do that. I want that to be me. Let's stab them. Okay, next up is a sorcerer. And I'm going to start out with sort of a weird recommendation. I really, really, really like champion dedication on sorcerers. And this probably sounds weird if this is your first time hearing this. So when you think sorcerer, you think this like super unarmored caster, right? You know, light robes, carrying scrolls, that sort of stuff. But the champion dedication gives you light and medium armor proficiency. And if you take an armor proficiency, an armor training feat on top of that, you can end up with a heavy armor caster. This is going to mean making strength one of your secondary stats beyond your charisma. But if you do this, you're not only going to have significantly more AC than you normally would have, you can also get the champion resiliency feat to make it so that you have more hit points, making you less likely to just go down in a strike or two. And you're going to have a strong reaction from the champion reaction as well. Depending on what spell tradition you have, your reaction options might vary wildly. If you're primal, for example, from low levels, you can be using interposing earth, and you probably like that a lot. But if you were an occult sorcerer, and lose the path is what you are looking at instead, well, one of those things is definitely stronger than the other. Lose the path is something that, yeah, at very high levels, sure, fill those low-level spell slots with that and fire those off. You won't miss them anyway, but I love me some interposing earth. So if you are playing a sorcerer that is often not going to have a good reaction in your spell tradition, especially at certain levels, this becomes really strong. And I have drafted up a metal sorcerer with a champion dedication that I like a lot. It feels very flavorful for the elemental metal sorcerer to be in heavy armor. But if that isn't your jam and you just want to be dex based, you might want to go for a psychic. Many sorceress bloodlines come with a decent focus spell, so taking the psychic dedication alone for the bonus focus point might be worth it. And if you don't like your focus spell that you initially get, you can use your focus points from being a sorcerer to cast an amped cantrip. Now, this is a time that you might not go for a damaging cantrip from the psychic dedication, though. I know a lot of times it is very appealing to go after amped daze, which hits very hard, or amped frostbite that has absurd range and can give you some temporary hit points as well. But this might be a time where getting something like glimpse weakness or shield or amped guidance might end up being better, so that you can 2-action spell and 1 action use an amped cantrip and make good use of your 3-action economy. Next up is the Summoner, which is a caster class, but since they get their Super BFF Eidolon, they don't necessarily have a ton of spell slots. They would be pretty broken if they got max spell slots of every single level, while also being able to attack like a martial character. And so I think that means in most cases you end up with 4 spell slots. 2 of your highest level and 2 of your highest level -1. And since you are operating on limited spell slots, doing something to round that out when you are on a tough adventuring day can be really good. And this is a time where a Kineticist dedication can be absurdly strong. You cast Protector Tree, you protect your allies, and this is a resourceless thing, so if you blow through your spell slots in the first half of the adventuring day, in the second half of the adventuring day, you still have something that you can lean on. And since the Summoner effectively has 4 or more actions per turn due to the tandem actions and act together. Using 2 actions to cast a protector tree is not nearly as much of a tax on this character as it might be on other characters. I also really like the medic dedication here. Battle medicine is really, really strong on a summoner because you and your Eidolon share an HP pool. So when you heal yourself for more, you are also healing your Eidolon for more because of that shared HP pool. So the more things you can do to make it so that your battle medicine goes further, the better you are going to be. There are also follow-up feats for battle medicine, the godless healing, mortal healing, paragon battle medicine sort of stuff that you might want to look into as well. Next up is the swashbuckler. I really like acrobat here, which some people think is kind of redundant. So why might they think it is redundant? The swashbuckler gets extra skill increases every couple of levels from something called stylish tricks. And this skill increase can either go to acrobatics or to the skill specific to your swashbuckler style. And so if you want to be, eventually legendary in acrobatics, you can just do that without using any of your normal skill increases. But if you want acrobatics and you also want the skill of your specific swashbuckler style, then going acrobat lets you get both. And since tumbling through uses acrobatics, and that's one of the ways that you can get panache, it's a good idea to potentially have both. But if you want both and you still want some other things going up in proficiency for out of combat reasons, this is one of the better ways to do that. And one of the cool ones that I found in doing my research for this video is Claw Dancer. Now this is one that I have not played with, and this is one of the only ones in the whole video that I haven't played with. But I think it was noteworthy enough to put in the video anyway. Claw Dancer has a feat later on called Wheeling Grab, which has the possibility of entering a stance, tumbling through, and grabbing as a single action. And that is a ton of action compression. And that sounds really cool to me. So if you like the idea of being a Claw Dancer, look into that a little bit more. Next up is the thaumaturge. And the first thing that I'm going to do is refute the common advice that I see. So frequently, I see advice telling people to take caster dedications on their thaumaturge. You're a charisma-based class, of course it makes sense to take a caster dedication. No, it fucking doesn't. No, it doesn't. And I understand on paper that it sounds like it should be good. But in practice, it's very not true. The thaumaturge is one of the most action-intensive classes in the entire game. Similar to the Magus, you just have so many things that you want to be doing in combat. You need to be exploiting vulnerability, you need to be making your strikes, you have other things that you might be doing because of certain implements you have, such as flinging magic with the wand, using a mirror to move yourself or set up flanking, sipping from a chalice for temporary HP. And that's not even counting some of the cool stuff you get later, like intensify vulnerability. And the reality of the situation is that thaumaturges do not have room in their action economy to cast spells. And I know this because I wanted to cast spells on this character. I thought it was super cool. It was my first Pathfinder character that I played in a full campaign. And so I was like, ooh, I'm going to get myself a Jolt Coil. And so I'm going to be able to cast Electric Arc. And I think in the entire campaign, I cast Electric Arc either once or twice. It was just not something that was reasonable for my character to do, given all of the things that I had to do with my action economy. Now, if you want to cast spells as a thaumaturge, there is a way to do that. And that is what the exceptionally powerful Scroll Thaumaturgy feat is for. But I was usually not using scrolls in combat, I was using scrolls out of combat to solve utility problems and situations. Need to breathe underwater? I've got it covered. Can't see in the dark? I've got it covered. There's kind of a mystery going on? Ooh, I'll use object reading to help solve it. And there are times where you can straight up, pull out a scroll of fireball and help nuke a crowd down, and that will be perfectly fine and good, but those are going to be few and far between compared to you just going and doing the thaumaturge, hit for big damage, solve the fight by gaining information as you recall knowledge while you exploit vulnerability, sort of stuff. So instead here, I would recommend taking a champion dedication. Even if you are getting a reaction from your class from something like the weapon implement, having the flexibility in having multiple different things trigger your reaction is exceptionally strong, especially since the thaumaturge reactions are narrow and are often only against the target of your exploit vulnerability. And assuming that you are not only in single target boss fights all the time, having your reaction trigger on multiple different things is a really, really big deal. If you do like the scroll stuff, there is also a scroll trickster archetype that you could look into as well to lean in further in that regard. For the witch, I think there's a pretty simple answer. Witches have really good feats. And the problem is that you can't take all of them. Now, admittedly, some of the witch feats are pretty questionable. The living hair type stuff is maybe not the way that you need to be going with your character. But you might want to have a familiar, while also being able to cackle, while also being able to make cool potions with your cauldron feat. Oh, and we need that one feat that lets us make ritual knives that we can use like wands. And if you find yourself in this situation, which I think a lot of witches will, I think Familiar Master is the easiest way to solve that problem. You use your free archetype feats to continue to scale up your familiar, while you use your class feats to get all of the cool things that are more unique to witches. This is, I think, the low-hanging fruit for what witches can be doing. If you like the cauldron style stuff and you want more of that, I think an alchemist dedication is another reasonable route to go on a witch. While witches have great feats, wizards have terrible feats. Wizard feats are in fact so bad that you might want multiple different archetypes on your wizard character. Much of the wizard's power budget comes from the fact that they are an arcane caster. And they are an arcane caster with access to drain bonded item so that they can reuse some of their spell slots. Some of the wizard types also get pretty reasonable focus spells. But since most of their power budget is coming from those things, their follow-up feats are often things like Reach Spell and Widen Spell, which perhaps are not going to spark joy. And my favorite thing to do on wizards is to go rogue and take Skill Master as many times as I possibly can. Skill Mastery, I forget which it is, becomes live at level 8. And so what I will often do at level 8 is use my class feat and my archetype feat to take skill mastery. And this results in my character ending up quite ahead in terms of out of combat power budget, in terms of the number of skill trainings that I have at the master level. And when you combine that with some of the other perks from Rogue, like mobility, to make it so that you can get out of town when the enemy walks up on you without eating an attack of opportunity, Rogue ends up being exceptionally strong on a wizard. And this is a time where you might start in Rogue, and then once you have the good stuff from Rogue, you might want to look into campaign-specific utility archetypes. And at the end of the campaign, your wizard might not feel like all that much of a wizard anymore as you kind of dip in and out of various archetypes, trying to get the best things from each of them. I think Rogue is absolutely the best place to start, though. As we bring this video to a close, I just want to give a generic thank you to anyone who has ever produced written strategic content for Pathfinder 2e anywhere on the internet. I had my own opinions about what archetypes I thought were best, but I spent a lot of time doing research for this video, kind of thumbing through strategy guides, thumbing through Reddit posts, kind of looking and seeing what other people's opinions were to try to give the best objective, like, hey, what is the best solution here? What are the sorts of things you should be looking at vibe for this video. It is too many places to reference in the YouTube description here, but generic thank you to everything that's out there. And beyond that, I want to say I hope you all enjoyed. If you have other thoughts about really cool free archetype combinations, please throw them down in the comments below. But I just want to remind you now that we're at the end of the video, and it's probably been well over an hour of post-editing time. I think this was north of 2 hours of recording time. I do want to remind you that my goal in this video was to be generic. So yes, I know that there are many specific weapon archetypes, for example, that are going to be very, very good on some of these classes, but I did not dive into those today because they were so specific. But if there's any generic stuff that I missed that you think is really good, throw them down in the comments below. There is one archetype that I want to shout out that I did not recommend anywhere in this video, but I do think is generically quite powerful, and that is the Razmiran Priest archetype. This allows you to dole out a very large amount of temp HP to your party, and it is repeatable. There is no once a day limitation or anything like that on it. The dedication feat itself is exceptionally powerful, but this is balanced by the fact that most of the other feats within the archetype are not particularly strong. If you want to do something that is going to keep your party from dying, the Razmiran Priest archetype is one of the strongest things that you can do. I am currently doing this in my current campaign, and I am generally of the opinion that it has been a positive thing in the campaign, not a negative thing in the campaign. But I did not recommend it in this video for any of the classes, because I do think it is one of those things that you should potentially clear with your DM before you do it, because it does absolutely change the degree of difficulty of encounters. If you are playing at a table where your GM just wants to only throw severe and extreme encounters at you all day, like I am, the amount of temp HP that you are going to see there is potentially not going to be a deal breaker, and your play experience will be fine. But if you are playing at a lower optimization table where people are just kind of there having fun, the Razmiran Priest archetype, if your GM is throwing more moderate encounters at you, might feel very, very warping, which is why I did not include it in the video. When I reach the end of my current campaign, I am probably going to do a write-up or video about it in some capacity. And there are a few other things in today's video that you might want to talk to your GM about. So for example, some GMs really might not like you spamming resourceless protector tree. That is a very, very warping thing. That's another one that I might talk to your GM about to see whether or not they're cool with that one. Because the GM is one of your players too. They might not be a player character, but they are one of the people enjoying the game. Make sure that you're not doing something that is going to make their life miserable as well. And with that, I think that is all of the wisdom that I have to share for today. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. See ya! Oh, and if you made it this far in the video, subscribes, comments really do matter. This one was a lot of work to put together. I would like this one to do well. I would like to get eyeballs on this. All right. Again, have a good day. See ya.